A push to decriminalize marijuana in one Texas city gets rejected by voters.
Every which way we look at marijuana use, it seems to go downhill.
We look closer at the vote. Does it signal a shift away from calls for looser drug laws? Lawmakers approve billions to improve safety and service for air travelers.
This bill was a bipartisan landmark legislation designed to really impact and improve aviation in America.
We speak one-on-one with Senator Ted Cruz about what the legislation means for Texas and what comes next. A medical emergency and a tip led us to investigate Botox injectors across the state, a certification almost anyone can get with a simple weekend training. We brought concerns like that to state leaders, now taking renewed action to protect Texas patients and crack down on this largely unregulated cosmetic industry.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. An effort to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana appeared on the ballot recently in another Texas community. The results turned out differently than similar initiatives in other Texas cities. Will Dupree looks into what this could mean for the state's marijuana reform movement.
Voters in Lubbock overwhelmingly rejected Prop A, a marijuana reform that drew loud opposition from local conservative leaders.
I think marijuana use and legalizing it or decriminalizing it, I think it's a little bit of semantics there, is a bad idea for Texas.
The proposal would have told police to stop arresting people for having less than 4 ounces of marijuana in most cases. This mirrored similar measures already approved by voters in at least 6 other Texas cities, including Austin. How do you think the loss in Lubbock affects the movement for marijuana reform?
We just weren't able to get that voter turnout high enough. But in a lot of cities, you may not have that same issue. And so I don't think for the overall mission, people should take this as sort of a bad sign, if you will.
So far, the idea of decriminalizing marijuana has gone nowhere at the Texas Capitol. That's why groups like Ground Game Texas are pushing local ballot measures to send a message and activate voters.
And we find that there's a lot of cynicism about political parties and candidates. And so when folks can go vote for an issue, that's more relatable to a lot of people and will give them a reason to go to the polls.
One change that's likely to come next session, however, is making it harder for cities to get these kinds of measures on a ballot.
They're allowed to have their referendums, but not when the premise of the referendum is against state law. It's hard to make an idea into law, but I'm going to be attempting to get that one through.
I visited a gathering for addiction specialists that happened this week in Austin, and they gave me an additional perspective that you may not have considered. One expert says it's time for Texas to legalize fentanyl test strips, pointing to Austin police recently detecting fentanyl in marijuana after a deadly surge in overdoses.
We really need access to things like fentanyl test strips so that as we see more marijuana come on the streets, people have access to make sure that there's not fentanyl in it.
You may remember a bill to decriminalize fentanyl test strips passed the Texas House in the last legislative session, but it died in the Senate.
Well, back to the local efforts to decriminalize marijuana. You mentioned that voters in 6 Texas cities approved ordinances, but the state is pushing back, right?
Yeah, and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is actually suing 5 of the cities where voters approved those decriminalization measures. There is one community, Harker Heights, that is not included in that because its city council actually voted to repeal the ordinance after the election. Soon, though, there could be 2 other cities that are added to this list of communities that have voted on this. Groups are actually collecting signatures right now to put this on the ballot in both Dallas and Lockhart.
Thanks, Will. Last month, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration announced it would move to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug. The federal proposal would recognize the medical uses of cannabis, but it would not legalize it for recreational use. Listing marijuana as a Schedule III drug could make research on it easier. Could also reduce taxes for legal cannabis businesses. The proposal still has to clear several review steps before it takes effect. Lawmakers approve billions to improve safety and service for air travelers. We speak one-on-one with Senator Ted Cruz about what the legislation means for Texas and what comes next. Plus, Texas doctors warning about the risks of Botox injections from people without proper training and medical supervision.
Do you want to play Russian roulette just because you don't want your face to have wrinkles.
We investigate this largely unregulated cosmetic industry, often operating out of the back rooms of salons and boutiques. A show of bipartisanship in Washington as the Senate passes a bill to reauthorize the Federal Aviation Administration. The $105 billion bill aims to improve customer service and safety for air travelers. The deal came Thursday night, just hours before a deadline that could have led to the FAA furloughing thousands of workers. It still needs approval in the House. Texas Senator Ted Cruz played a key role in pushing the bill through. The senator joins us now. This bill comes after news of several near misses at airports around the country, including here in Austin. What does this bill do when it comes to safety improvements?
Well, this bill does a major investment into safety in aviation. It, among other things, directs the FAA to hire substantially more air traffic controllers. That will help with safety. That will also help with reducing delays. It also invests significantly in technology on runways. We've seen, as you've noted, multiple near misses, including one at Austin's Bergstrom Airport, where two planes came within a couple hundred feet of each other, nearly collided. And so this invests in technology to try to prevent potential runway accidents like that. This bill also invests billions of dollars in airports and infrastructure in Texas and all throughout the country. You know, in the state of Texas, aviation is enormously important. It produces hundreds of thousands of jobs in the state of Texas, and there are millions of jobs in Texas that depend on having a vibrant aviation sector. And so this bill was a bipartisan landmark legislation designed to really impact and improve aviation in America.
This squeaked in just under the deadline. What was the big challenge to get this thing passed?
Well, look, it really was building bipartisan compromise. And I have to say, the way this bill moved forward, I think is a model for how legislation should move forward. I am the ranking member of the Senate Committee of Commerce, Science, and Transportation. And so for months, I've been working with the chairman of the committee, Maria Cantwell, a Democrat from Washington State. And she and I have been working to negotiate this bill and to reach a bipartisan compromise. In the process of drafting the bill, we solicited from our colleagues their priorities, and this bill incorporates amendments, priorities for over 200 different amendments that came from other senators, from Republicans, from Democrats, addressing needs and concerns they have in their states. That process was an extended negotiation as we worked through incorporating those amendments, and the final product we had was voted on Thursday night, and we saw an overwhelming bipartisan vote. In fact, out of the entire Senate, there are only 4 no votes out of all 100 senators.
Now, our partners at the Hill reported that some of your fellow senators gave you some ribbing as you tried to keep this bill on track, basically saying they found it kind of funny since they see you as usually the one blocking legislation with amendments or other holds, working for bipartisan legislation. Do you see this as a different role for you?
Well, it is true that my colleagues have enjoyed giving me some grief the past couple of weeks and managing the process through, and this is the largest bill that I've managed on the floor. Part of the reason for that is to manage a major bill, you have to be either a chairman or ranking member of a major committee. And in the Senate, that depends on seniority. And so I became the ranking member of the Commerce Committee just this past year. But yes, my colleagues were giving me grief. I sort of laughed because when I was managing the bill, I did it on the Senate floor from Mitch McConnell's desk. And I was threatening to carve my name in the drawer if they kept at it, which is an old tradition that you sign your desk when you're done serving. But look, you ask if it's something new, and I would say actually, no, it is not. This bill, the FAA bill, it so happened it is the 100th bill that I have authored and passed into law. And so this has been something I've been doing the entire time, drafting legislation, getting bipartisan support for that legislation, passing it into law. And I'll tell you, my principal focus when it comes to drafting and passing legislation is jobs, 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 because that's my number one priority in the Senate, and that's the number one priority of Texans.
All right, Senator Cruz, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
A medical emergency and a tip led us to investigate Botox injectors across the state, a certification almost anyone can get with a simple weekend training. We brought concerns like that to state leaders, now taking renewed action to protect Texas patients and crack down on this largely unregulated cosmetic industry. Backroom Botox, our investigation coming up. The FDA and CDC are sending warnings about Botox injections. In recent weeks, they've revealed at least 22 women developed symptoms after getting fake Botox from unlicensed or untrained injectors. Patients in at least 11 states, including Texas, were hospitalized for breathing and swallowing trouble and blurred vision. Concerns growing as social media ads offer quick weekend trainings for anyone to become an injector. Doctors caution, without proper training and medical supervision, injections could cause a risk of longer-lasting side effects of droopy eyelids, swelling, uneven facial expressions, or worse. Investigator Arzo Dos discovered how this cosmetic industry operates largely unregulated, sometimes out of the back room of salons and boutiques in towns across Texas.
2.5 hours north of Austin sits the town of Dublin, the Irish capital of Texas.
Hometown, it's what Dublin feels like, you know, mom and pop shop.
Last summer, one woman, as luck would have it, found a shop here offering Botox out of its back room.
We went specifically for a lip flip. So just Botox in my lips.
The woman agreed to an interview if we didn't reveal her identity about her procedure.
And I was like, okay, I need a second. Just kind of feeling a little dizzy.
And the moment her luck ran out.
I just remember waking up and there being like bright lights and people in my face and everything like that and panic.
She says she fainted. An EMS report also details a 5-minute seizure and vomiting.
The injector did ask our EMS staff, you know, what do I do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Well, the only way to make sure this doesn't happen again is to, you know, ensure that your patient qualifies for the injection.
The woman says she has no record of what she signed online with the injector earlier that day, only an email inviting her to start her treatment and download the company's app.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think we would be, you know, investigating what somebody's injecting in people's lips.
While it's not illegal for someone to inject Botox, because of what happened in this case, Dublin police are now investigating if this injector was practicing medicine without a license. In Texas, Botox injectors must have someone licensed in medicine supervising, like a physician assistant, a registered nurse, or a doctor serving as a medical director, in case there are any complications. An attorney for Texas-based MySpaLife confirmed this injector had completed its training. But police tell us the company's medical director, listed online back then, was a pediatrician in Tyler, more than 3 hours away, who hasn't returned our repeated calls and emails. The company's attorney would not respond to questions about this specific case for privacy reasons, but says MySpaLife does not provide any medical procedures and has developed an app to connect people with a licensed medical practitioner without having to go into an office. That practitioner can then supervise and authorize an injection. Dublin police would only confirm medical staff was not at the shop the day of the emergency. Other steps that might have been taken are part of the ongoing investigation. And because it's ongoing, we've chosen not to identify the injector or the shop where she worked.
We will handle any charges that are come to the person who did the injection.
Chair lays out Senate Bill 1120 and recognizes Senator Schwertner explain the bill.
As police across Texas try to enforce the safety measures they can, one state lawmaker, Senator Charles Schwertner, who's also a doctor, is pushing for broader oversight. He filed legislation last regular session to prohibit estheticians and cosmetologists from administering Botox and other injectables unless they're licensed or authorized.
I think it is incumbent that we as a state protect Texans and their health and safety and welfare when it comes to any sort of invasive procedure.
Schwartner's bill aimed to give Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation authority to discipline those professionals.
Any individual that is involved in the care, in this case, the cosmetic care of an individual, is held accountable when something goes wrong, and that they should have had the proper level of education, experience, and training.
The bill stalled after passing the Senate, but he plans to refile next session and promises to use what we've learned to craft an even stronger bill.
Shine the spotlight on this problem. We can work with our lawmakers to provide the government oversight that is needed for the safety of our citizens.
I think it's definitely important to have proper training for sure, especially with injections going into the face. It's a very scary thing, and I feel like it's not something to be messed with.
Arzo Dost for State of Texas.
The FDA has issued a black box warning for the medications used for Botox. That's the most serious warning because of potentially dangerous side effects. Doctors say that's why it's important to have supervision from someone with a medical background. What happens when the Texas Medical Board takes disciplinary action against doctors when it comes to Botox? We'll explore what the state can do to protect patients who pay for these procedures when our investigation continues. Backroom Botox, our investigation continues. We first revealed problems with some of these cosmetic injections.
Everyone was just kind of panicking. It was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, what's going on? And then the EMS and police arrived.
Anyone can get trained to administer Botox in Texas as long as it's under the supervision of a medical professional.
There needs to be some avenue for accountability of that individual that supposedly went out and got that education, training, and experience when they do it wrong.
In the last 6 years, the Texas Medical Board has taken action against more than 60 doctors and other individuals for either improper supervision or the unauthorized practice of medicine. Investigator Arzo Dost learned most were related to med spas, where many patients go for Botox treatment.
Yes, these are just a few of the cases. A Canton doctor disciplined after 2 patients had medical complications at his med spa. Just one of 8 locations across Texas, we found him listed as the medical director. A San Antonio med spa, another doctor prohibited from practicing medicine because he was working under the influence of drugs and alcohol and giving injections without gloves, in bathrooms, and reusing syringes on patients. And just last month, a man arrested for aggravated assault in the Houston area after providing illegal cosmetic injections without a license, something that worries doctors pushing for more patient safety.
It's sort of this environment that hasn't been regulated.
Dr. Jeffrey Hall is a plastic surgeon, serving as medical director for all of the providers at 2 Austin area med spas.
My responsibility is to have oversight on everything that's done in the practice. All of this is Botox.
While his staff includes estheticians, only he, a nurse, and a nurse practitioner administer injections like Botox.
I witnessed them doing their treatments, and they've also done training before they walked in the door to work here.
But the rules are different depending on where you live. In Texas, Botox injectors must have someone licensed in medicine supervising, like a physician assistant, a registered nurse, or a doctor serving as a medical director, like Dr. Hall, in case there are complications. In Alabama, injections can be done by a doctor or another medical professional, but only if a doctor is also in the room. Many states require any medical professional, including doctors, to have specialized and advanced training in cosmetic procedures to administer Botox.
Do you want to play Russian roulette just because you don't want your face to have wrinkles?
Dr. Patricia Aronin is with Texas 400, a grassroots group of doctors advocating for patient safety across the state. The nonprofit says it will be watching closely next session as Senator Charles Schwartner refiles a bill to prevent estheticians and cosmetologists from injecting Botox and other products unless they're licensed through the state or authorized to give the shots.
My plea to the public is Educate yourself. Ask questions. Don't assume that somebody in a white coat or in scrubs is actually knowledgeable about what it is they're proposing to do to you.
It's tough to track the size of this problem. Dr. Aronin says people don't always know how or where to file complaints with the Texas Medical Board. And it can be embarrassing for some to share what happened. The data we've been able to obtain shows 91 complaints filed with the board since 2019 related to Botox and other cosmetic procedures. Right now, the agency says it has 9 open investigations related to improper providing of non-surgical cosmetic procedures. And while the law doesn't allow the board to go after just anyone for these problems, it can discipline doctors if they are supervising or injecting the Botox improperly themselves. Arzo Dost for State of Texas.
Thanks, Arzo. There are other steps you can take to protect yourself before a cosmetic procedures. Doctors recommend having it done in a medical setting with all the resources if there are complications. If you decide to go to a place like a spa or salon, ask questions about the credentials of the injector and if there is a licensed medical practitioner on site. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.